choir to debate to theater. SDPB shines a spotlight on South Dakota's talented students through SDHSAA All-State Fine Arts Programming. Good, useful, and full of wonder. SDPB. Every day, SDPB connects South Dakotans with stories that inform, inspire, and bring us together. SDPB, good, useful, and full of wonder.
Meeting of the House Commerce and Energy Committee will now be called to order. Welcome, everyone, again. Glad that you're here in the room and listening online. Please turn your cell phones to silent. Lobbyists, reminder to be wearing your badge. Testifiers must sign the guest register and pages. If you could distribute any handouts for us. All testimony and questions will be directed through the chair. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Representatives Elward.
Here.
Duffy.
Here.
Greenfield. Here. Kaiser.
Here.
Mullally.
Here.
Knowles.
Here.
Peterson.
Here.
Schwanz.
Here.
Shurma excused. Yuri Balk.
Here.
Weisgram.
Here.
Baumüller.
Here.
Lems.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Do we have a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting? Motion by Baumüller, second by Yuri Balk. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. All right. We have our pages in the room. If you would want to come up. I see one. Oh, two. Great. Come up and introduce yourself. Tell us your name, where you're from, and your future plans.
I'm Aubrey Bretlinger. I'm from Rapid City Stevens High School, and I plan to go to DSU next year to get an animation degree.
Hello, I'm Belle Niederbaumer. I am a senior at James Valley Christian in Huron, and next year I plan to attend the University of Nebraska-Lincoln for nutrition and health sciences.
All right. Great. Great hearing from you. All right. We're going to just go right to our first bill this morning. We're down to two bills. We had asked, one bill was asked to be moved to our next meeting, and so we only have two. Wow, we're going to have an easy day, guys. Hopefully. We'll see. All right. So we're going to go right to House Bill 1292, which is limit the ability of a health carrier to recoup, recover, or retroactively deny previously paid claims. Representative Heerman, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Melissa Heerman, representative for District 7. I would respectfully ask the committee to move Amendment 1292B.
Okay, motion by Representative Weisgram, second by Representative Uri Balk to move the amendment. Any discussion? Why don't you just tell us?
Yeah.
1292B.
To provide a little context, the original intent of this bill was solely the guardrail around the 18 months. When we modeled this legislation after the other states that have done it, they had a lot of other additional steps and procedural things. I don't think that's necessary in order to get to the crux of what we're trying to do, and in order to get everybody on the same page and find a nice spot of compromise. We have struck out a good chunk of Section 2 and streamlined the bill overall.
All right, very good. So with that, we have a motion and a second to move Amendment B. We'll do a voice vote on this amendment. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. All right, amendment passes. Okay, Representative, please go ahead on the amended bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 1292, as amended, is a narrowly tailored bill. It focuses policy around simply placing reasonable limits on how and when a health carrier may retroactively recoup or deny a claim that has already been paid. So the issue we're trying to address is very real operational disruption. The retroactive claim takebacks, particularly for rural healthcare organizations, as a very high level, if your insurance pays on your claim and the patient has paid on the claim, as a healthcare organization, that account is closed out as paid. But the reality in South Dakota is that a health carrier could come back 2 years, 3 years, 5 years later and say, we did an internal audit, we perhaps overpaid you on this claim, and we're going to take that money back. And so we're just saying industry standard in the other states that have done this, some did 6 months, some did 3 years. 18 months is a very reasonable compromise, I think, operationally and in order to get business done for the day. The bill would put this timeline in place, which all the major stakeholders have agreed to is reasonable. It's about predictability and fairness. It gives providers reasonable certainty that once a claim is paid, it will not be endlessly reopened without clear justification. You'll note there is a carve out for fraud, so this isn't related to fraud, abuse, or waste. This is simply related to more of perhaps the health insurance carrier believes they have overpaid. And with that, Madam Chair, I'd like to turn it over to an industry expert who can speak to more of the specifics on how these takebacks affect operations on the ground. It is a very niche area, so she will be able to help us address any of the complicated questions that may come up. And I will stand by for questions.
All right, thank you. Come on up. Other proponent testimony. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Christine Papina. I'm the Vice President of Value-Based Care and our Employee Health Plan Administration at Monument Health. I'm here today in strong support of House Bill 1292. I feel I'm uniquely qualified to speak to this bill because I've worked on every side of issue it addresses. I negotiate payer contracts for large health system. I oversee the finances of an employee health plan. And earlier in my career, I worked for health plans and negotiated payment terms with providers. I've also personally experienced the patient side of this system as a survivor of a catastrophic illness. Because of these experiences, I understand firsthand how insurance payment practices impact payers, providers, and patients. Section 1 of House Bill 1292 addresses a fundamental imbalance of how insurance recoupments are handled today. In every payer contract, providers are required to follow payer policies as a condition of their participation. Those policies can be changed at any time. I reviewed the standard policies of 4 large payers operating in South Dakota, and they all allow insurers to automatically recoup overpayments, often without advance notice to the provider. There are no limits on how far back they can go to identify an alleged overpayment. It can be 2 years, 5 years, or more after the original claim was paid. At the same time, providers are held to strict deadlines. Claims must be submitted within 180 days to 365 days. Appeals of incorrect payments or recoveries are often limited to 60 days from payment. In some cases, if the dollar amount is below the payer-defined threshold, the provider cannot appeal at all. This creates a system where payers have unlimited recovery rights, while providers have narrow and sometimes impossible windows to respond. House Bill 1292 introduces 2 very reasonable protections. First, it requires payers to notify providers before recouping funds, and second, it limits the look-back period to 18 months from the date of payment. These are modest guardrails that promote fairness and predictability. Recoupments are not simple accounting adjustments. Providers first must identify the recoupment on the electronic explanation of benefits that may contain hundreds or thousands of claim lines. They must then determine if the patient the recovery applies to, adjust multiple patient counts, and decide whether or not the recoupment is correct and whether or not an appeal is allowed. When recoupments occur years after the payment, appeal rights have almost always expired. The provider is left with no option other than to absorb the loss. For many hospitals and clinics, without expensive AI tools, this administrative burden is costly, time-consuming, and unsustainable. While contracts often reference dispute resolution, those processes are typically payer-controlled, require binding arbitration, and place the cost burden of that dispute on the provider. Legal action is usually prohibited, and the provider must prove full compliance with all payer policies before disputes can even be considered. By establishing timeframes and a lawful, transparent dispute process that applies equally to both parties needs to be created. This is especially important for out-of-network providers who otherwise have very limited recourse. Finally, the bill protects patients. When insurers recoup payments long after the services are rendered, patients may receive bills months or years after they believe their care was fully paid. Most patients don't blame the insurance company, they blame the provider. This erodes trust, causes confusion, and creates financial stress for families who thought their medical bills were solved. House Bill 1292 helps prevent this by reducing delayed billing and promote timely resolution of payment issues. House Bill 1292 sends a clear message that fair payment and recovery practices matter. It protects providers from unlimited retroactive recoupments, promotes transparency and communication between payers and providers, and shields patients from confusing and delayed medical bills. Based on my experience as a payer representative, a provider executive, and a patient, I believe this bill strikes the right balance. I respectfully urge you to support House Bill 1292.
All right. Thank you for that testimony. Any other proponent testimony?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Allie Dawes on behalf of Sanford Health. Just a quick me too, and appreciate the sponsor working so closely with us and helping get this bill to the best possible way that it can be. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Any other proponents?
Good morning, Madam
Good
Chair,
morning.
members of the committee. I'm Kim Malsom-Reisen with Avera. We too stand in support of House Bill 1292, and I would associate myself with the previous comments. Thank you.
All right. Any other proponents?
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Tim Raves, Idaho. I have not signed in yet, ma'am. I will when I get done because I know I'm going to get tackled by the page. I also rise in support and associate myself with the previous comments. Stand by for questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other proponents? All right. I don't believe we have anybody online, so we will move to opponent testimony. Any other opponents or any opponents in the room? We have any opponents? Okay. Well, with that, then we will, do you have any other comments before we move to questions? Okay, we'll move to questions from the committee. Representative Shorma.
Thank you. For the sponsor, you'll work perfectly fine. So, good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you. So, this deals largely with situations where they were overbilled or underbilled or both.
It's a good question, but it's dealing with overbilling because the situation to do a take back is only in the instance of overbilling. So that's what we're speaking to in this bill. Sorry, Melissa Heerman, representative for District 7.
So if a patient is underbilled, how long can they come back and try to collect the difference that they were undercharged? You want to phone a friend?
Well, you're saying if we charge them less than it should have cost, if we
Right.
charge the patient less than it should have cost, I don't see anyone knocking down the doors to pay more.
No, as a consumer, right. But of course, the healthcare provider would want to collect the difference. If it was just a clerical error or something like that.
Phone a friend. Come on up. State your name, please, again.
Yes, Christine Papna. It's a difficult question to answer because everybody can do it differently. And I'm not in revenue cycle, but typically we would, as a hospital system, would try to reconcile those bills within a couple of months of what we consider final payment when the claim is closed.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions from the committee? Any questions? Wow, guys. Everybody's tired. All right, well, we will close questions and then we will go to committee discussion. Any discussion from the committee? Any discussion and or motion?
I move to pass.
All right, we have a do pass motion from Representative Baumiller.
Second.
Second by Representative Greenfield. Comments on your motion?
No, Madam Chair, there was no questions or, I guess, further discussions, so we'll let it stand as is.
All right, with that, we have a do pass motion on the table. So, Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Elward,
Aye.
Duffy,
Aye.
Greenfield,
Aye.
Kaiser,
Aye.
Mullally,
No.
Knowles,
Aye.
Peterson,
Aye.
Schwanz,
Aye.
Shorma, Uribalk,
Aye.
Weisgram,
Aye.
Baumiller,
Aye.
Lems.
Aye.
Madam Chair, 12 yea, 1 nay.
Having received a majority of the members elect, House Bill 1292 as amended passes. All right. We will move on to House Bill 1318, prohibit natural asset companies. Welcome, Representative Auk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Auk, Representative District 18. Boy, I think everybody is kind of having one of those Monday moments. Madam Chair, I have an amendment.
Is it
that I'd like to
posted?
move. Yes, it is.
All right. Would you like to move it at this time?
I would like to move it at this time.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I move House Bill 1318A.
Okay, we have a motion to move House Bill 1318A by Representative Knowles, second by Representative Baumiller. Any comments on your motion? All right. Go ahead and explain the amendment, if you
I
would.
apologize. The amendment basically focuses on state land, only state and public lands, completely takes out any question of private land.
All right, with With that, we have a motion and a second on the amendment. This will be a voice vote. All in favor to move the amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Amendment passes. Representative, go ahead on the amended 1318A.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise today in strong support of the Natural Asset Company Prohibition Act. In 2023, Securities and Exchange Commission advanced a proposal to allow a corporate structure known as Natural Asset Company, or NAC, to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange. This proposal was developed in coordination with the Intrinsic Exchange Group and supported by an Inter-American Development Bank. The goal was to create a new asset class, not based on production or goods, but based on control of natural assets. When American public learned that what this structure could allow, there was immediate and bipartisan concern. The SEC, Securities Exchange Commission, ultimately withdrew the proposal. However, proponents have made it very clear that they intend to continue advancing this concept. So what exactly is a natural asset company? A NAC is designed to hold rights to land and natural resources, assign financial value to so-called ecosystem services, carbon sequestration, biodiversity credits, watershed services, habitat preservation, and other environmental outputs. Those values are then monetized and structured into an investment vehicle that can be bought and sold. In short, land and natural resources become financial instruments with shareholder returns tied to environmental accounting matrix. Now let's bring this directly to South Dakota. This legislation is about state-owned lands and state-controlled resources. South Dakota holds public lands and resources in trust for the people, for recreation, for multiple use, for grazing leases, wildlife management, and for long-term stewardship. Under Natural Asset Company model, those lands or associated rights could be placed into a corporate framework where management decisions are driven primarily by investor returns based on ecosystem valuation matrix that could fundamentally change the incentive structure governing state land. If maximizing carbon credits increases share values, access may become secondary. If biodiversity scoring systems discourage certain uses, traditional activities could be restricted. If ecosystems valuation models reward minimal human activity, public access could be limited. And once those interests are bundled into publicly traded entities, management influence may shift away from state accountability and toward shareholder expectation. Members, this is not an attack on conservation. South Dakota already conserves and does so effectively. Hunters and anglers fund wildlife conservation through licenses and excise taxes. State agencies manage habitat with science-based principles. Grazing on state land supports both agricultural production and ecological balance. Our model is simple use and public trust. The NAC model is financialization. When public land is treated as a tradable environmental asset class, its primary purpose risks shift from serving the people of South Dakota to serving investors seeking environmental credit returns. This bill ensures that does not happen here. It does three straightforward but important things. First, it prohibits the state from its political subdivisions from selling, leasing, licensing, or encumbering state-controlled land or resource rights to natural asset companies. Second, it prevents natural asset companies from operating in a manner that would grant them direct or indirect interest in state lands or resources. Thirdly, it provides clear enforcement mechanisms to ensure that such transactions would be null and void. This legislation is specifically about protecting public access and public control over state-held lands. South Dakota hunters rely on access to state lands for upland bird season, big game opportunities, and habitat areas. Anglers rely on access to state-managed waters and related resources. Producers rely on responsible grazing structures on certain state lands that support both agricultural activity and habitat stewardship. If state land were placed under a NAC structure and managed primarily for ecosystem monetization, the calculus changes. Access could shrink. Traditional uses could be deprioritized. Management goals could shift toward meeting investor-driven environmental matrix rather than serving South Dakota citizens. And once public land interests are embedded with complex shareholder agreements, reversing those arrangements could be legally and financially complicated. Some may argue that this is theoretical, but SEC's willingness to advance this proposal once demonstrates that the framework exists. This financial infrastructure has been built. Investors are actively exploring environmental asset classes. The question before us is simple. Should the state of South Dakota ever participate in converting state-held lands into Wall Street traded environmental asset vehicle? The bill answer is clearly no. Our public lands are held in trust for the people of South Dakota, not as speculative instruments in emerging financial markets. We believe in stewardship. We believe in conservation. We believe in public access. And we believe state land should remain accountable to the people of this state. This legislation is about foresight. It ensures that South Dakota's state-owned lands and resources remain managed under our laws, our oversight, and our long-standing multiple-use principles, not under experimental corporate financial structures. Members, this is a prudent, measured step to safeguard our public lands for hunting, fishing, and responsible grazing and long-term stewardship. I respectfully ask for you to vote yes on Natural Asset Prohibition Act. Thank you, and I am available for questions because I am your only proponent.
All right, thank you for that testimony. So, just asking, are there any other proponents that maybe we've missed in the room? I don't have any online. All right, with that, we will go to opponent testimony. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the House Commerce Committee. I think this might be the first time I've ever come in front of this committee. Good morning, and my name is Caleb Fink, and I am the Analytics Architect and GIS General Manager for the Office of School and Public Lands here in South Dakota, and I appear to you today in opposition to House Bill 1318. The Office of School and Public Lands here in South Dakota serves as a trustee for approximately 760,000 acres of surface trust lands, primarily used for grazing and ranching leases. Additionally, we oversee 5.5 million acres of subsurface mineral rights across South Dakota. Our constitutional mandate is clear: to maximize long-term sustainable revenue for the benefit of South Dakota's K-12 SIS schools, our public universities, and other designated public institutions. We fulfill this duty by leasing surface lands for grazing, haying, and agricultural production, and by responsibly developing our mineral interests through oil and gas exploration and other compatible uses. The revenue we generate supports public education statewide, a responsibility that we have carried out faithfully since statehood. We respect the sponsor's intent with the House Bill 1318 and its subsequent amendment to safeguard state sovereignty and prevent speculative encroachment on our natural resources. However, we believe this bill is premature and overly broad response to a threat that does not currently exist in South Dakota. The SEC's 2023 proposal would allow natural asset companies to list on national exchanges was voluntarily withdrawn early in 2024. That withdrawal followed the overwhelming public opposition, more than 2,800 public comments against the rule, a 16-page joint letter from 25 states' attorneys general from across the country, and a request from more than 31 members of Congress to extend the comment period so that more citizens could be heard from. As it stands today, there's no active federal rule enabling these natural asset companies. Despite extensive research from us, finding concrete examples of how this bill might actually impact our trust lands has been very difficult, precisely because the entire issue remains hypothetical. Without a concrete definition from the SEC of what constitutes a natural asset company, we're left speculating about the risks that may never materialize. Yet the bill's broad prohibitions would still apply if passed. And this makes House Bill 1318 a solution in search of a problem. And we have three primary concerns with the bill as it's written in its amended form. First, the broad and vague definition of a natural asset company, especially since the SEC has not finalized any such definition, could inadvertently capture ordinary farming and ranching operations. Even more troubling with the bill's language defining an act as an entity that holds rights to measurable ecological outcomes and manages area for conservation, restoration, or sustainable management. We fear that our own office could be classified as a natural asset company. The Office of School and Public Lands actively manages trust lands for sustainable uses, including practices that improve soil health, water quality, and biodiversity to ensure long-term productivity and revenue. If House Bill 1318 passes without clear safeguards, this could prohibit our office by law from continuing its core function, putting us in direct conflict with Article 8 of the South Dakota Constitution, which mandates the management and revenue generation from these trust lands for public education. Second, the bill's language regarding extractive resources is problematic for our office. A significant share of our revenue comes from oil and gas leases, whose extracted resources from the subsurface of public trust lands and then pay those royalties directly in support of K-12 education. Third and most concerning is in Section 2, which states that the state may not engage in business directly or indirectly. And I want to focus on the indirect part of this with a natural asset company. This creates real uncertainty for us. How would we know if we're doing business indirectly with such an entity? And consider this scenario from one of our lease auctions. Our land agent is going to have to go into a room full of bidders, maybe quite like this room. And he's going to have to ask how many of you are participating in private conservation programs offered by companies that could later be defined as a natural asset company or that could be involved with a future SEC-defined natural asset company on their own private land. And much like some of the looks around the room, they're going to glaze over and go, well, I don't know exactly what that means, right? And so they're going to probably raise their hands because they don't want to be in violation. And if this bill were in place, now our land agent would have to say, okay, you folks are not allowed to bid on those leases. That shrinks our pool of bidders that could potentially drive the revenue up on those leases. And furthermore, they might not have any qualified bidders left at all. And in the worst case, some of these parcels could receive no qualifying bids and go entirely unleased. And not only would our office lose critical revenue for schools and universities, but our current lessees are the ones that pay the full property taxes on these trust land parcels, taxes that directly fund county governments and local school districts. And if those parcels sit unleased, either our office would have to return to the legislature requesting additional general funds to cover those taxes, or the counties and school districts would be forced to raise property taxes on South Dakota families and businesses to make up for that shortfall. In conclusion, many of South Dakota's educational institutions and public institutions depend on reliable revenue generated by our office. As well-intentioned as the bill may be, its unforeseen future impasse could force those same institutions and our counties and schools to rely more heavily on tax revenue to replace dollars lost from the trust. For those reasons, the Office of School and Public Lands respectfully asks the committee to send House Bill 1318 to the 41st Legislative Day. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will stand by for any questions that the committee may have.
All right, thank you. Any other opponents in the room? Hello.
Madam Chair. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Paul Lorenzen. I'm an administrator within the Division of Resource Conservation and Forestry with the Department of Agricultural and Natural Resources. I rise in opposition to House Bill 1318 as amended. This bill appears to provide a solution to a problem that currently does not exist and will not likely exist anytime in the next 3 years. The bill as amended prohibits the state or political subdivision from contracting with, investing in, operating, or owning national asset companies. This bill appears to be a reaction to the Federal Register notice published by the Securities and Exchange Commission in December 2023 seeking public interest in a federal rule to allow natural asset companies to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange. This notice was rescinded in January 2024 voluntarily by the Securities and Exchange Commission after they received numerous negative comments about the proposal. So basically my testimony is we really don't feel that it's necessary for this bill at this time. With that, I wrap up my testimony and ask for a no vote on House Bill 1318 as amended. I will stand by for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Other opponent testimony?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Garth Wadsworth with Elevate Rapid City. I feel like we're beating a dead horse at this point, but I think it's worth stating as simply as possible. Right now, this definition applies to absolutely no one. There is no such thing as an SEC-listed natural asset company. All we're doing is opening the door for future complications that we're not yet prepared to deal with. I do think it's also worth pointing out Section 7 exempts the state retirement system from the rest of the bill, which I think is a bit of an admission. This does recognize that these companies could, if they were to be defined and created, provide some value. They could provide shareholder value, and if they do come into existence, we would want our state retirement system to be able to benefit from those. I have a hard time reconciling those two ideas, and so we just ask for your opposition. Thank you.
Okay, any other opponents?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Angela Ehlers. I represent South Dakota's conservation districts, and I can say ditto to everything that the previous testifiers said. We do agree with them. As listening to the testimony, a couple other thoughts came to me that I hadn't thought of. We work a lot with partners, both private and governmental, including the federal government. For us to be able to know as we're working with all those partners whether or not they're indirectly involved in whatever this future natural asset company could be an issue, because the size of the federal government would make me really hard to figure that out. The other point I'd like to make is that we work with private companies, especially in some of the soil health measures. Like we do work with carbon sequestration because it's just naturally occurring because we plant grass, we plant trees, we plant, and some of our national corporations, for example, Indigo Ag is supported by CHS, I believe, and Land O'Lakes. I don't know what those companies are all involved in. I don't know 3 years from now what they're going to be involved in. We work on the purposes of providing agriculture the opportunity to positively impact the sustainability and the conservation. And they may have a side company out there that we don't know about. I just think it could place us in a bit of a quandary and accidentally maybe violate this law. Thank you.
Thank you. Further opponents?
Madam Chair, committee members, Doug Abraham, attorney from Peer Registered Lobbyist, South Dakota Retailers Association. Just kind of want to echo the prior speakers. We just generally have some concerns about prohibiting conduct when it's, one, not an issue and we're not aware of anyone actually engaging in this business at this point in time. So we'd encourage your opposition. Thank you.
All right. Any other opponents in the room? Seeing none, I don't believe we have any online. So we will go to rebuttal.
Madam Chair and committee, boy, that was thrilling with those opponents. This is the second year I've brought this bill, and we've done our homework. That was the point. These natural asset companies are not, as a matter of fact, part of the exchange right now, but they're working. Because if they weren't working, they would have taken down their website, which is still active. They would have completely reverted back the talk of it at Davos and the World Exchange Forum, which they haven't. So they're just in waiting, kind of like sharks waiting for prey. So now, if I'm not here next year, or some of you aren't here next year, we have people sitting behind us who are aware of what these are. And what they actually are capturing our assets, ecosystems, some things like pollination, droplets of water, dew. They are trying to materialize and create something to sell on the Board of Exchange because we're running out of assets. So this is kind of a warning that we as a state need to pay attention to this, because when they come in, you may not or may know that they have to divulge who they are, if you are going to use our natural assets and trade them on the Board of Trade, they have to reveal that to us as a state. So we're going to know. But whether you send this to the 41st day or you pass this bill so we can talk about it on the floor is your decision. But now we have the people sitting behind me that have done their homework, and they know these are real, and they are probably coming back to the state of South Dakota. And I just want to respectfully thank you all for your attention and your diligence on this matter, because it's real. Okay? Thank you.
All right. Any questions? Representative Shorma.
Thank you for the sponsor. Representative Oak.
Madam Chair, thank you, Representative Julie Auk, District 18.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I know that you and I are aligned against the Beautify America land grab that was proposed.
Yes.
Is this connected to that in any way?
Yes, sir. Yes, it is.
And how?
Okay. Well, how they capture these natural asset shares to sell is they put them into a conservation easement into perpetuity, into forever. So that's how they capture them. And then they pretty much take control of that asset, whether it's a piece of land, and we are specifically talking about state-owned or subdivision-owned property here in the state of South Dakota. And they tie that land up and basically say, we will control that, and then we're going to take the bird migration, and we're going to monetize it. We're going to take the pollination of the bees, and we're going to monetize it. And we're going to the CO2 methane carbon release, and we're going to monetize that, and we're going to sell that as derivatives on the Board of Trade. That's exactly how it works.
Okay, thank you. Can the state sell state land today?
Sure.
Okay. Can they sell it to individuals?
As far as I know, yes.
So we're not prohibiting individuals from selling this land to natural asset companies.
No, Representative Shorma, it is strictly state-owned land being sold as a natural asset class. Correct.
Right. So there is a way around it if natural asset companies go to farmers or investors and purchase state land.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yes. That's a concern also. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Excuse me, Representative Peterson.
A few for Mr. Fink from School and Public Lands. Thank you, Madam Chair. First question, it was mentioned perpetual easements. I am not a fan of perpetual easements either. Can the School and Public Lands sign up state lands for a perpetual easement with an outside entity? Do you know, are you familiar if there's rules prohibiting that?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
The question to Representative Peterson to can School and Public Lands enter into perpetual easements? I would have to go and do some research to see if we're legally allowed or prevented from doing so. I can tell you that we don't. So the purpose, and if I can expand on that a little, Madam Chair, with a little leeway, the purpose of the land that was given in trust to the schools, and remember that's why we have the General Beetle statue down on second floor in the Capitol, is to provide for a way for us to generate revenue for our school kids. And by leasing that land out at public auction, that is how we've done that for decades here in South Dakota.
Follow up, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that answer. In a little bit different vein, I did catch you said in statute the responsibilities of the office is to management and revenue generation, right? So I imagine if this thing would come to fruition, this concept, there's probably practices in place right now where revenue could be generated for doing exactly what is currently being done, both by the state or, as you said, by those leasing, the private citizens that are paying for the lease and operating it. This could prohibit those people from just generally doing their job, correct?
Madam Chair, I believe so.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Representative Yuri Bulk.
For the prime.
Madam Chair, Julie Auk, District 18.
Maybe I'm missing it, but in the bill anywhere, is there anything about, or if there was a way to maybe start this route? Is there a way of just reporting, trying to have some kind of report that would trigger when a natural asset company is acting in bad faith or taking over public land, if that makes sense?
Makes complete sense. Only because, and I understand your question. First of all, these products, they would be considered a derivative or a share or a stock. They're not being offered as a form of commerce as of right now. And if they ever were, then yes, they would have to report that they are being offered. And of course, then if they were going to go into an arrangement, because if you think about when you have a portfolio through a broker, you really have to, you consciously know what you're buying. I mean, if you have a good broker, okay, well, we're going to invest 25% in NACS. We're going to invest, blah, 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 blah. So you would have to know that this is happening. It isn't something that they aren't going to know. It would be very apparent because through the Securities Exchange Commission, the amount of information that has to be divulged to an investor or to someone who's offering an investment, it is documentation upon documentation. They will fully be aware that this is happening. So if you can think about when you receive a prospectus in the mail of any kind of an investment, it's typically this thick. You will know when a natural asset is being offered from a natural asset company.
All right, we're going to go to Representative Greenfield and then Representative Duffy. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question is for the prime. I was wondering how many states now are currently ringing the alarm bells about this very subject?
Madam Chair, I am aware of 13 different states in the state of the United States that are bringing legislation or have brought legislation in the past. Last year, of course, we go into session early. So last year when this was presented to several states, it was met with opposition because, of course, legislators are very uneducated and unaware of what exactly these are. And so, of course, it failed in most states. So this legislation is, of course, coming before 13 or 14. I'm pretty sure this year, and we are the first ones to present it to our legislature this year so far.
Okay, so my understanding is this is not passed in any state thus far. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, and you're also hearing, once again, I'm bringing this legislation more than anything as a warning. It's been presented to ALEC. It's been presented in several other legislative conventions, and it's real. It's very real. It is being met with great opposition from bankers, from conservation efforts, and I think that has a lot to do with the former federal administration's America the Beautiful bill, and what they ultimately plan to do. It's a private property. It's a property ownership. It's a property ownership bill. It's all about property. It's all about allowing a state to maintain their property rights, and the fact that individuals can also do this, they need to keep in mind that it's a private property issue.
Representative Duffy.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I'm semi-fascinated by this a little bit. I'm a, not fully recovered capitalist, so I do believe assets can morph in such unbelievable ways. I've seen it over the last 45 years. So I'm not I'm a little, and the only thing I really know about what the testimony was is the only thing I'm a little bit familiar with was the carbon sequestration, and we're all familiar with that. Can you kind of just lay out a scenario with using that as an example? Because I can't quite figure out how you'd monetize it, but that doesn't mean it couldn't happen.
Madam Chair, I'm Julie Auk, District 18. Okay, they would, for instance, if you take a look at the handouts that I presented you, on the back are the companies that are invested in this intrinsic exchange group. The World Economic Forum, for instance, would put a valuation of so many metric tons on so many acres of land, and they would sell those, they would box those up into a share and sell that on the Board of Trade for $100 a share. And those shares, those metric tons of carbon sequestration on a parcel of land in South Dakota would be sold. And because we've offered those carbon sequestration tons available to be sold, they would then determine how that property or that land is used. Because you know how shareholders work. They determine how the money is, how their property, because their shares, would be utilized. And they could determine that on this piece of land in the state of South Dakota that could be held by individuals in Saudi Arabia, Israel, China, wherever those shares are traded, Tennessee, they could determine that we've decided that we don't want any human footprint on that parcel of land because we are able to sequester XYZ carbon and pollination, and they're sequestering things that you and I would look at have no intrinsic value, but they are able to do that with this new asset class. Does that make sense? No. Oh. No. Well, if you, but if you, it is very complicated. Most things involving any kind of these ecosystems and diversity ecosystems is complicated. If you want to educate yourself, I would recommend that you go to the Intrinsic Exchange Group website. They do a very good job of explaining exactly what they're up to and what their plans are. And they are completely and fully active and trying to, and of course, you know, our New York Stock Exchange is where the think tank is and where all of these new ideas are born. And so it will come here more than likely first. Okay? Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Representative Alward.
Question for the Prime. What are your thoughts on, you know, the issue with the school and public lands being included underneath that natural asset company terminology? And, you know, if you see that being included under there, what are your thoughts on, you know, if this goes forward and possibly amending that out to provide an exception for school and public lands?
Madam Chair, Julie Auk, District 18. My fear for the school and public lands, if they were to be captured into one of these asset classes or these groups, that we could have China determining how our land is being used. We could have North Korea. We could have somewhat a foreign entity determining how our public lands are being used in the state of South Dakota, and it may not be exactly what the people of the state want those lands to be used for. That would be my, if there is a fear, that would be my halt. Okay?
All right, any other questions? Any other questions? Okay. I have a question. So I know this is a really hard topic to really wrap your mind around because it just seems so far-fetched. But obviously we know that this did happen, it almost happened, that they were going to sell this. 25 attorneys general weighed in, and I remember that because it was in 2024 and we were all in session when this was happening. And I don't mean to go on a rant here, but I'm just wondering, so you are saying that a natural asset company can bundle up resources. So land we get because that's something tangible. Water. What's really hard to wrap your mind around is air. So they could package up air that we breathe, and they could put an intrinsic value on that, and you could invest in that. And then, of course, there are things tied to that, like climate change and things like that. Could you expound on that idea just a bit more?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Julie Auk, District 18. Yes, as a matter of fact, they are attempting to do this in foreign countries where they are putting a value on not only the air, but the actual photosynthesis that is caused by bees. And how they're measuring that is pollination of flowers. And so they are putting a dollar value on the bee, the bee population, and then they take into the real fear here is they take into account how many humans are around those bees, how many head of livestock are around those bees, and they're putting a higher valuation when there is no human contact. The ultimate goal of this organization, and we're just going to put it out there, is they do not want any human footprint, any human contact on the land. They want the land to completely be unavailable to humans, to grazing, to hunters, to fishermen, they do not want any utilization of any one of us using this land. So it is a way for them to tie it up. And by tying it up and by putting a valuation and able to trade it on the Board of Trade, which someday maybe some of you will own a NAC, they can actually reimburse the states for that property while they're able to capture it and basically take any human contact away from it.
All right, any other questions before we go to committee discussion? Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we will move to committee discussion. Any committee discussion? Representative Shorma.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Beautify America really did start to consume, they purchased land to take it out of real productive farmland, to take it out of production. And their goal was 30% of the land in the United States by 2030. They were going to own that. Their real goal was 50% of the land by 2050. That has gone away, but this looks like a workaround to me to accomplish that goal over time. A little more complicated, but so I understand why this is being brought up by the good representative, and I appreciate her bringing this from an education standpoint, since it hasn't happened yet like the Beautify America had undertaken and started. I think it's maybe a bill ahead of the need, but certainly could happen in the next 3 or 4 years. Thank you.
Any other comments? Representative Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just some discussion. Some of the scenarios that have been laid out today, boy, they are scary. I mean, I wouldn't vote for any of those things to happen. I just think it's unrealistic to think that an elected official that manages these school and public lands would ever decide to engage in these contracts. I mean, we're talking like it'd be inevitable and we'd have no choice or ability. They can't, these natural asset companies can't seize our state lands and make us do things. I mean, they'd be contracts that would be entered into by the commissioner or by a lessee of the lands that could get a little more extra money while they're grazing or doing something that is seen as favorable by these companies. So I'm going to show a lot of respect to the Department of School and Public Lands, and that they would never do something that would be a detriment to our state. And so I am going to resist this bill.
Right, Representative Duffy.
This really has me thinking. It is fascinating stuff. I'm not supporting it today because it's just not ready. But I think it's the canary in the coal mine. We already know what air rights for airplanes look like? Who controls air rights? Does South Dakota control the rights above us, or does the FAA? If you go to a big city, there's the rights above your building are negotiated in purchase. So this is not unrealistic. It's just too soon for me. But I'm actually glad she brought it. Thank you.
Any other comments? Representative Schwanz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a tendency to be more of a forward thinker and a proactive person to assessing potentials that could happen in the future. And even one of the opponents themselves said that we don't see a problem within 3 years. Well, I'm not really the type of person that wants to sit around and wait for 3 years for something to happen and then have a knee-jerk reaction. So I will be in support of this today.
Okay, any other comments? I would just make a quick comment. I had mentioned before that when we were here in 2024 and this was actually happening in real time, that they were getting ready to put this on the New York Stock Exchange through the SEC. And they withdrew that proposal with people really scrambling and getting, their voice heard with that, including, like I said, those 25 attorneys general. But it was going to be in a new asset class, and I'm just reading here off my computer. It was going to be a new asset class for holding, managing, and valuing ecosystems. And of course, we know that some of this stuff came along under the Biden administration, and then it takes a while to reset when you get somebody new in there. I guess my concern would be, who are we going to have in some of our offices in the future years that are coming? We trust so many of our people that we have in place today, but who's going to be there next year, or 4 years from now, 10 years from now? And so anyway, I do appreciate the representative for bringing the bill, and I would entertain a motion. Representative Yuri Balk.
Sorry, could I just have one comment really
Yes,
quickly?
go ahead.
Yeah, I do appreciate the good representative for bringing this. I think it is something that we need to be looking at, and I do, want to protect public lands from ensuring that everyone has access to them for sure. I do wonder, this does seem maybe a little too broad and a little too wide casting of a net, and I wonder if we could maybe have more specific language, or triggering a report, or if there's certain if we have the list of countries that if they're buying farmland, they something like that is just kind of reining it in a little bit more until we have that definition at the federal level, where we have those different things. So again, really great bill, really glad you brought it, but just I think a little too broad and not quite ready.
Representative Sharma.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know I can't make a motion once I make comments, so I'm going to make a comment anyway.
Okay.
I'm concerned that we aren't including private land sold to foreign entities that have nefarious reasons for purchasing it. That's the way that Beautify America was going, and I don't know why it wouldn't go that way again. So I don't think it's broad enough in that area. So we'll go with that. Thank you.
Representative Greenfield.
Just a quick comment. When we have a bill like this, I know that we're not all well versed in this very topic. And so when I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, well, by passing this, who are we helping? And who are we currently having in place that we're hurting? And then what's going to happen, because so many times we pass bills and then we say, well, that didn't work. So I'm going to be a no on this, and maybe we need to just have it more narrowed down, I would say. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Representative Baumiller.
I move 41st day.
All right, we have a motion to move to the 41st days. Motion by Representative Baumiller, second by Representative Duffy. Comments on your motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for bringing the bill. As you stated in your testimony, there were legislators who were uneducated. I will say I am one of them, but you gave me a lot of information. I appreciate that, but I'm just not ready to move forward today. Thank you.
All right, and with that, Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Elward,
No.
Duffy,
Aye.
Greenfield,
Aye.
Kaiser,
No.
Mullally,
No.
Knowles,
No.
Peterson,
Aye.
Schwanz,
No.
Shorma,
Aye.
Yuri Balk,
Aye.
Weisgram,
Aye.
Baumüller,
Aye.
Lems.
No.
Madam Chair, we have 7 yea, 6 nay.
Having received a majority of the members elect, that bill, House Bill, what was it? 1318 as amended, moves to the 41st day. All right, with that, that is all our bills for today. We will have 4 bills on Friday. So come ready and prepared for that. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn by Representative Knowles, second by Representative Shorma. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Meeting adjourned.
From choir to debate to theater, SDPB shines a spotlight on South Dakota's talented students through SDHSAA All-State Fine Arts programming. Good, useful, and full of wonder. SDPB.